Coming up in today's episode.
Even though we are in a generation that has all the tools to be able to be update of every information, but we still have some people that never hear about Jesus. And we have some remote area in our countries that you need to go there and give them Jesus Christ.
You're not asking us to, with my white skin, to come over and preach. You're not asking, you're not asking for money. You're asking for tools, and to be able to do this more and faster and more effectively, and that is 100%, 1,000% my heart.
Welcome to the iBIBLE podcast with Steve Cleary, brought to you by RevelationMedia.
I am Steve Cleary, the iBIBLE podcast. Welcome to another episode. Today I have with me Tim, our Director of Sign Language Ministry, and his friend that he brought to the office, Parfait. So let's talk about your language, because I have a fun testimony you may know. So we pronounce, it is spelled E-W-E.
Yeah.
But it's Awe.
Yeah.
And we have a translation going on in Togo, and there was this man that came to the place that was doing the translation in the studio, and he says, I'm going to be doing some evangelism this weekend, this week. Do you have anything new, Christian content in the Awe language? And he said, we have the real story of Jesus, but it's not quite done yet. They haven't put the finishing touches on it yet. And he said, can I see it? And he said, I want it. He goes, it's not done. He goes, I don't care, I want it. And then he saw a projector was in the same studio, and I think it was like a Jesus film projector that a missionary had left until he returns. He goes, can I use that projector? And they said, yeah, take it. So he took the projector, he went to a village, and he showed the real story of Jesus. We started getting these daily reports. 5 people came to Christ, 12 people came to Christ, 7 people came to Christ, just from showing the real story of Jesus in their language. I don't know if you had heard this story, Parfait, that, because it wasn't your group, it was another group.
Yeah.
And then we're excited to see what God is doing in Togo, which is a lot of us would have to look around the map to find Togo, right? Or you say, go to Nigeria and go north, right? Or how do you get to Togo? It would be hard for us to find on a map quickly.
Yeah.
And here God is doing this work. But is there much Christian content in the Awe language?
Yes. Awe language have had missionary early age. So most of the people from Awe language are from the south. And we have Awe group. Awe is the population's name. And the language itself is Awe Be. Be is the language.
So it's the people and the language.
Yeah.
So it's the Awe people.
Awe the people. And
Awe
Be.
Be.
Awe Be. Yeah,
Awe Be the language.
And the pronunciation in my language is Evegbe. Evegbe. It's hard to pronounce.
Yeah, but it sounds much more elegant than the way we're saying it. So thank you for sharing the real pronunciation.
Most of the population are Christians population. Yeah.
So how is a short film like The Real Story of Jesus being effective at sharing Christ?
Yeah, actually, Steve, it's true that as we are talking now, there are still some people that have never heard about Jesus Christ. And it is something that is the irony of life, and is a controversy that even though we are in a generation that has all the tools to be able to be update of every information, but we still have some people that never hear about Jesus. And we have some remote area in our countries that you need to go there and give them Jesus Christ. And those are the people that are really the target. And it is true that before these people get the tools that is needed to know Jesus Christ, we need to go to them. And usually doing evangelism, open evangelism, is something that bringing people together. And in my culture, anytime there is an open activities, even people from far areas come just to see what is happening there. And that's how we evangelize people. And these tools can be used for evangelism with the churches. Church leaders can easily use these tools to get into these remote areas. So it is very important. And I appreciate the work you are doing, and I know God will bless. Thank you.
So what you're saying is that the Ewe people may be Christian, but it hasn't reached the outline.
The majority are Christians. And Ewe people, initially, they believe there are people that worship voodoo, and they're animism. And animism people are worshiping idols.
Yeah.
And they do believe also in idols worshiping. And most of them, this generation, are now open their eyes, and they know that, okay, we need now to be saved. And they are now coming to Christ. But there are some of them that are really in the remote area that are now doesn't even have the chance to know about who Jesus is.
So they've never heard. They would
never heard who Jesus
even though
is.
within the country they'd be an unreached people group.
Yeah, they're still unreached people group.
We don't think about that too much, like in the U.S., because I'm sure there are pockets of people, that have never heard about Jesus. But for the most part, these countries, many Western countries, are well evangelized. This people. But now you live in a country, and Togo is not a big African country; it's a small African nation. But these remote areas, and we're hearing this more and more in different African countries, where you go into these areas and the gospel's never been presented.
Yeah.
And so that's why you're saying, even though there's a lot of Christians among the people, you're reaching people who have never heard the gospel.
Exactly.
And that's why this missionary was saying, so many are accepting Christ every time he's showing the film. So good, that explains it for me. Thank you. I know you're working. So Africa, let's look at Africa as a whole. For those watching, I am going to, let's see, some new technology. Josh, I'm going to trust this works. Our producer set this up for us. There it is. And so looking at, let's see if we can zoom in, looking at Africa. And so for those of you listening, just kind of visualize. So Africa, from what I understand, is broken up into, 5 or 6 different regions. And so we talk about North Africa, which is largely Muslim, and considered like, when you look at the MENA, we refer to this term as MENA, M-E-N-A, Middle East and North Africa. And so countries maybe as low as Sudan, Egypt, Libya, Algeria, and countries that would be considered north. And then you look at the next region below that would be Western Africa, right?
Yeah.
Parfait. So, which goes down to about Nigeria.
Yeah.
And then you have Central Africa in the middle, Eastern on the side, Mozambique, and the countries, Somalia, which some very difficult countries to work in on the east. And then, of course, the south, that's a little bit easier, right, to work in. Yeah. So you were talking to us earlier about some of the most difficult countries. And so your region is, although you've worked over most of Africa, you said except North Africa, your region is mostly West and Central. Yeah. What are some of the most difficult countries to work in?
Actually, the most difficult country to work in will be Mauritania, Mali, some parts in Burkina Faso, and then Chad, actually.
Chad is on the list. Yeah. And these are all of these countries are going to be Muslim countries.
Yeah.
So really, that's what you're facing, and in the remote areas you're facing could be voodoo, witchcraft, serving idols, and I hear that from any remote area within these countries, but otherwise the wide sweeping challenges are going to be Islam.
Yeah, there are challenges everywhere, but particularly in this and those countries. The challenges are very great challenges. And the challenges, one of them is the persecution of the Christians. And they are not even open to receive Christian missionaries or whatever Christian you are. And particularly, for example, in Mauritania, if you want to travel into Mauritania and you bear a Christian's name, is like a risk.
Just the name?
Just the name is a risk for you.
Now, is that going to be in your, because if you were born into a Christian family, you're going to have a Christian name.
Yeah.
In your passport, is it going to say what you're?
Like, my name is David Ayanou now. It's a risk for me. Or if your passport just states that you are a pastor or missionary, you are no risk. Before you start the activity there.
Now, you were also telling us that before we started the podcast that you can have, if you had the Bible on your computer,
yes,
and you went into Mauritania or some of these other countries you're talking about, what might happen?
It's risky to take Christian content into some of those countries, especially in Mauritania. It's very risky to take content there. And even in your laptop is risky. So sometimes it is really not encouraged that you carry Christian content into these nations.
Even on your laptop?
Even in their constitution is clearly states that you are born Muslim and you will die Muslim.
What if you had a Bible app on your phone? Equally dangerous?
I have never tried that before.
Or you wouldn't recommend trying?
But I think the good things is how risky it is and how too much we see it that it's impossible to do. Jesus Christ is everywhere. And sometimes for the Christians, those countries in which we say there is a few Christians, sometimes there are more Christians in those countries than the other countries that say that these are Christians. Because believing in Jesus Christ is something that you can't just see on the person. Like, it's not just like physical things. It's first of all spiritual. Mm-hmm. So it's come from the spirit before getting into the physic. So many of them, it is an open country that they can follow up like social media or whatever is there. They are following it, and they have also a way to get together to worship God and to follow up with. It is possible to have the content on your phone, but for the expatriate to come into the country, could be risky for them.
Yeah. One of the things we're trying to do is we've been looking at delivering Bibles through our apps and our promotion of the real story of Jesus. We're delivering it in such a way that they don't need to put it on their phone to have access to it and how they can download it and stuff. So we have a team, fortunately smarter than us, that's been working on this for many years and doing this kind of work. And it's important for me to be able to provide the Word of God safely. It's never going to be safe in many nations, but as safely as possible. And I think that has shown, because when we did it. Parfait, I know you're not working in North Africa, but we did a campaign in Libya, which is a very, very close country, and we had a lot of people. We asked a survey if they would like to receive a Bible from us digitally, and 20% of the people. They first watched the real story of Jesus, and then we asked them if they would like a Bible, and over 20% said yes. And we also worked in Yemen and Saudi Arabia doing the same thing. And now I want to talk to you, and we'll talk offline again about the countries you're working in, because how we can do this, how we can support your work in Togo and the surrounding countries that you're working in, but also to get it into the more difficult areas. Because even northern Nigeria, which is not far from you, is lots and lots of. So Christianity is legal, but it's the persecution is severe. And in Hausa, popular language there, we have an unbelievable people telling us they want more in the Hausa language, and so it's legal, but they're still going to face persecution, and especially if they evangelize a Muslim. And there's terrorist groups in northern Nigeria, and we're also looking at South Sudan, where there's tremendous persecution in the Nuba Mountains. And so going there, and I think you said you've worked a little bit in Sudan. And I'm praying about starting a campaign in Somalia. So the interesting thing about Somalia, which is nearly impossible to work in, it's actually one of the countries that's most active on social media. And so we've discovered, so as we unpack this huge opportunity in Africa, and I think I don't know if you've heard the term Global South.
Global South, yeah.
So right now, a lot of mission leaders, a lot of international mission leaders believe this is where the Spirit is moving. This is where God is moving in the Global South, which is everything south of the equator, right? Considered. So you subscribe to that same.
Yeah, that's true. And even I was recently in a pastoral conference, and during the conference, the speaker publicly say that even the revival will come from Africa very soon. And I think it's
actually
true.
I hear that.
Yeah, it's true.
And if you look at stats, Africa has more young people than any continent. So
That's true.
when it comes to young people and future leaders, world leaders, not only in Africa, but where they travel all over the world, the African influence is going to be huge on the world. I mean, it just is based on even population and population growth. And, I hear that more and more. We've actually visited in poor countries in Africa where they've said, how can we donate to you? How can we help you? And sometimes I think I had an offering taken in a church I was in an African church, and it's a very, very poor area. We had driven past slums to get to the church, and they wanted to take an offering for us. And that envelope was this thick, 3 inches thick. I mean, it was bursting, full of money. And in our money, it was a few $100s, but in their money, it was thousands and thousands of dollars. Of when you consider that somebody may only make $100 a month, or even $1 a day, for someone that's just sweeping floors or something. So you see that same thing. And it's like, what is God going to do in these countries, in these African countries? And you can speak into it more. But from the little I've seen, it is amazing what's going on in Africa for the gospel.
Yeah. The moves of God actually is in Africa, and especially in the countries that are risky. That's where God,
where the persecution, where the danger is.
Yeah, that's where God's moves is actually, because their faith is a genuine faith, and they trust God in all condition. Sometimes, when everything is going well, having faith is simple.
Yeah, you don't think you need God.
You don't think you need God. But when you are in pain, there is how your faith will be proved. So those areas, God's moves are around. People are really embraced with the revival fire to know God. And actually, even there are some people, language group that sets some standard. Like you need every parents, every homes. The target is to teach every kids, every children to know God, to have God in his heart.
To teach them.
Yeah, this is the part of the education right now in Africa. And this movement is still ongoing movement and is embracing every areas and churches around. But what is really would be encouraging is to having the tools to complete this movement.
Yeah.
Because many of them, personally, my story, when I got born again, I went back to my family's home where I was persecuted. And that's where I started my first church. And even my friends were, you are a fool. Why can't you just look around and find a place and start your church? But my first church was my room where I gathered my own family. And through me now, all my family is saved now. And I have started from my family. That's the same thing is in Africa right now. And everybody is looking for making a good future for his family. And thanks for the missionaries, thanks for Bible's organization, because these tools are real tools. And it's helping the families to get closer to God, to know God. And it is true, in this movement also, there is a movement like, Satan will never leave Christians in a peaceful situation. There is always persecution. There is always some stuff that can come along the way to reduce some people's faith. But there are always this honor and this hunger for God, to know more God. And this movement is still ongoing in all over Africa, all the countries. And as I said in the beginning, especially in where the persecution are very strong.
So I want to back up to what you said, because you're saying the people are there, God is moving. What you're asking for is the tools. So naturally, a lot of times when I talk, it's like, that's what we need to do. We need to give you the tools. You're not asking us to, with my white skin, to come over and preach. You're not asking, you're not asking for money. You're asking for tools.
Yeah.
And to be able to do this more and faster and more effectively. And that is 100%, 1,000% my heart. And I know the hunger for the tools. And I think that's why we were sharing with a large organization that works in persecuted countries, and we were sharing them how we had 2,500 requests for Bibles in Saudi Arabia, in Yemen, in Libya. And they said, do you think those that they're Christians? And I said, we believe many of them are Christians, and maybe they feel alone. Like you said, maybe God has his remnant everywhere. And we feel some of them are seeking Christ. I don't think somebody who didn't care or wasn't looking for the gospel or looking for the truth, maybe they're a Muslim and they want nothing to do with anything but Islam, maybe, I don't think they would be asking for a Bible. I don't think they'd be watching the real story of Jesus. And so we're doing more sharing of tools than maybe just evangelizing, and because we're reaching people who need the tools. And we have no idea how many times they share it. Actually, we do know on some of our campaigns, it is shared far more than we ever pay to put it online. So we'll pay to put it online, and then it just gets shared, and it gets shared, and it gets shared. And one example, I was talking about northern Nigeria. We were talking about close, not far from where you are, and Nigeria considered Western Africa, right? Yeah. And Western Africa, and the Hausa language. And so if I was to post an ad in the U.S., a Christian-based ad, and just put it out there generically, you might have 1 out of 300 people click on that ad, and just to even see what it is about. And that's pretty nationally. That's pretty average. It could be as low as 1 out of 1,000. When we did a campaign in northern Nigeria, we had 1 out of 10 people click on that ad. 1 out of 10. Can you imagine, for those of you here in America, if we clicked on 1 out of 10 ads, that's all we'd be doing is clicking on ads. And so 1 out of 10 people in the country that saw the ad wanted to know more. And on one of the campaigns, it was actually 1 out of 7. And now we're seeing 1 out of 4 people want a Bible after they watch the real story of Jesus. So we're seeing the same thing. Also, on the other side of the world, when we invest in social media and online content, we're seeing the exact same thing you're saying. People are being drawn to God. God is moving in these countries. He's moving in families, but they want the tools. Because if they didn't, they wouldn't care about what we're offering. Yeah. If someone says, well, they can get a Bible anywhere, and you probably can. You probably can read the Bible on Wikipedia. Yeah. But they're asking us for the Bible the way we're offering it, in a safe way, an online way, after offering the real story of Jesus. They're wanting to engage with us. 1 out of 4 people in the most persecuted nations. And we just tested 3. So now we want to go to the other countries. We want to partner with you, Parfait. We want your advice on how we can do this better. And we want to reach will you help us reach all these languages? How many languages can you help us with?
The most as possible.
As many as possible. Yeah.
Many as possible.
I can settle for 200.
Yeah.
Many as possible. You're so busy, I don't know if any will be possible.
Yeah, we have contacts around, and those contacts also could really help.
And they're all church-based.
Yeah.
So, which is great. We're not going to studios. We're not going to people that are, online saying, I'll do your translation for, hundreds or thousands of dollars. We're going to the church. Yeah. And what we have seen in Africa, and I really commend you for this, we have seen we're seldom even asked for money. In many places we work, it's like, can you pay for this? Can you pay for this? Can you pay for this? And I've seen many instances in Africa where you guys paid for things yourself. Mm-hmm. You gave the labor and fed the workers and didn't even ask us. Now, obviously, we're going to provide support, with equipment and, food. And sometimes you have to bring in, the translator has to, especially on the voiceovers, you have to bring them in, right? Mm. So there's transportation cost. They don't have a car. They don't have a motorcycle. We have to go get them and bring them to a studio. So we're obviously going to provide the funding to do that. And I'm so excited that you're willing to help us because I know it's hungry, and I agree. From everything we hear in my experience, I've traveled to some of Africa and seeing the hunger and what God is doing. I'll leave you with this one testimony in Sudan. Actually, in the Nuba Mountains, where we're trying to start a campaign, we just have to finish Genesis in Arabic. It's in production now. But we showed a Anglican bishop. We showed him what we were doing, and he says, I can take this to the Nuba Mountains. And we said, we can give you projectors or solar-powered. They want solar-powered tablets. And I said, how many people will you reach? And he said, because the young people actually have phones in the Nuba Mountains. They don't have shoes, but they have phones. And I said, do they have internet? And he laughed, and he goes, no electricity. Sometimes they have electricity, so we can help them charge their phones, and no internet. And I'm like, what do they do with their phones? Mm-hmm. And you know what he told me? He says they share pictures and videos from phone to phone. So they take pictures of themselves, their activities. They take pictures of videos. They take videos and share them from phone to phone. So I said, well, we could share our content that way. Mm-hmm. He said, absolutely. He says, we'll bring them all in. We'll show them the content. We'll put it on their phones. I says, how many of them will you reach? Mm-hmm. And he laughed, and he goes, what do you mean, how many? Mm-hmm. I'm like, how many people will you reach? He laughed again. He goes, all of them. That was the answer. All of them. None of them are going to not participate. Mm-hmm. And like you said, they're going to come because it's community, right? Someone's going to show the picture. Yeah. They're going to want to see what's going on. Mm-hmm. And they're already rejecting Islam. Mm-hmm. I think in some places Islam is now the slowest growing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that long ago. I don't know what your experience is, Tim. I grew up being told that Islam was the fastest growing religion in the world.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing.
I don't think it's true anymore.
I don't know. It's been a while since I've heard anything like that.
They don't talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
So Islam grows by birth, but we hear time and time again that Muslims in these countries are turning away from Islam. Islam has failed them.
Well, I think what one of the phenomena that I think is happening is that as the internet grows, people just become more aware of what's going on in the world, and they see that they've been blocked from, by either religious leaders or schools or political leaders or even their family from viewing content, and the internet has a way of getting them around these kind of things. They see what's happening, and they're hungry for something true. And this is what's happening now. I think you're right. And they want to experience Jesus. They want to experience the life of Christ.
Yeah, and I don't even have to ask you, Parfait, if people you work with in remote villages have phones, because I probably already know the answer.
You're right.
Yeah.
Most of them, they have phones.
Yeah.
They have phones. We were in Kenya, and somebody said we were showing them what we were doing, and they said that's fine in the city, but in the poor countrysides they don't have phones. And the person was right if he had made that statement 1 year prior. But we literally drove 100 miles into a poor village, and it takes all day to drive 100 miles, and because all the traffic and the lack of some road infrastructure getting into the countryside, and everyone had a phone. Yeah. And if they didn't have a phone, they said we get to use our parents' or our grandparents' phone, every day for an hour. They use it they grab it for 2 hours, and so everyone's using phones all the time. So I am very thankful for what's going on in Africa and for your work. I'm hoping we get to work together a lot, Parfait, and we get to do some translation. We get to send you some tablets. We get testimonies back. Please, I invite you to tell us how we can best serve you. And I know the translations are a huge part, but how we can support that process. I don't know if we can get 200 languages, but I think it would be awesome. It would make a big difference in the countries you're working in as a tool. Mm-hmm. So I can't overemphasize it enough. The workers are there. God has his remnant in the world that's willing to share Christ, even in the face of persecution. They're simply asking for the tools. Mm-hmm. I mean, why? It's actually easier than trying to raise a ton of money to buy plane tickets to go over there. And, it's great when we do. I'm a huge advocate of short-term mission trips, but we can do so much more by simply providing tools and leaving the tools with the very people you're working with. How can we pray for you? How can our listeners pray for you, Parfait?
Pray for my safety.
Safety.
And also pray for the deaf community. This, I know we have not talked about the deaf community, but this community also is the unreached population in the world.
Unreached.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was with a Chinese businessman who was visiting the U.S. last week, and same thing. He has a heart for the deaf, and he says just in China there are 25 million unreached deaf people. Yeah. I'm sorry we didn't get to talk about that. I promise you we're going to move in that direction. Here's my frustration, and we are trying so hard to be able to do a signing version of iBIBLE. Mm-hmm. And we set up a new motion capture studio. Tim, you've been helping us with it. It's called Chameleon, and it has not been used for what we're trying to use it for yet. Mm-hmm. It's been used for great opportunities for signing, but not with like character signing. Mm-hmm. For us, and I've shared this on a podcast, I've called it the holy grail of sign is to get the characters themselves to sign, so that you're not watching a signing person off the side. You're watching the character sign, just like a deaf person would talk to other friends who have sign language. And it pains me so much that my staff is like, we don't have it working yet. We don't have it working. I'm like, don't give up, and keep working on it. And I think, Tim, we ordered some new parts. We ordered some new computer parts. We're working with an engineer who invented and created the system, and we will not give up, Parfait. Our goal is that we provide videos with a character sign and not adding. I am done adding a signer in the corner. I'm going for the best. That's what we would want. And I think that's what's going to give the best tool. We've been told by the deaf community leaders, they actually ask us reluctantly because they know it's never been done before. Right. There is a Jesus film version of ASL, but it's in one sign language. And we estimate, Tim, how many sign languages in the world?
Well over 400.
Over 400. I mean, this number's growing year by year, right?
Well, yes. Again, just like finding and counting the deaf is challenging, it's also equally challenging to count the number of sign languages.
Yeah. So the number I know when I started looking at this 5 years ago, 300 was a common number.
About right. Yeah.
And now we're saying it's over 400.
Yeah.
And we need a way that we can reach any sign language, that it makes it easier to add the new signing. And with the technology we're trying to set up, so you've seen the studio, Parfait, and I'm so frustrated that it's not working yet. I'm trying to be patient. I'm trying not to stress out. It's not in my nature. I want it tomorrow. I want it working tomorrow. Yeah. They're like, the part's going to come in Monday. And I'm like, what? Shipping doesn't happen on Thursday? Why isn't it here? But we're going to keep our listeners and our family members of the family of Revelation Media Ministry, going to keep them informed. And I'm making the commitment to you that I will not quit until we figure this out. We're hoping to have a pilot episode in April. Okay. My staff is very nervous about that, but I have not given up to have the prototype. Once we have the prototype, then that's it. I mean, we'll be good to go. I mean, there'll still be a lot of work, but we'll know we have a pipeline to deliver videos to the deaf community, and then we can go to Africa, and we're talking about setting up a studio in Cameroon. We can even go to multiple places in Africa. We can set up studios. The signers can come in, and if they do the signing, we can put it on iBible. And please, if you're praying for me, if you're praying for Revelation Media and iBible, pray for this. Pray that we get this studio set up, we get it working properly, so we can do the signing episodes of iBible. And please remember to pray for Parfait's safety. And for the deaf community that they're currently reaching. Thank you for joining us for this episode of iBible. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I had in discussing what God is doing in Africa. Until next time, God bless.
The iBible Podcast with Steve Cleary, brought to you by Revelation Media. This episode was produced by Joshua Burton and Aaliyah Gonzalez, with original theme music by Xperia. Subscribe to stay up to date on new episodes and iBible content, and visit the show notes for more information and resources from today's show.